Hello everybody and welcome to Every Movie Ever. I'm your host Eric and welcome to the show where we are trying to review every movie ever made and where I have decided today to dress like Dale from Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers and to start the show by talking to you about Pitch Perfect 3. Yes, the final part in the Pitch Perfect trilogy. Those a cappella loving gals from whatever college are back to sing more a cappella stuff. Here's the thing. So I've seen the whole Pitch Perfect series, and I thought Pitch Perfect was, fine. I thought Pitch Perfect 2 was, okay. Pitch Perfect 3, kind of loved it. I kind of loved it. Now listen, at this point, you are either into this or you are not into this. And to be fair, I guess I'm kind of disproving my own point, because I am only kind of into it. But what I can say is that I love Anna Kendrick. She is one of my favorite actresses working today. She's extremely charming, very watchable, a really talented screen presence. And having her in these movies has been a lot of fun, especially as she has sort of come into her own in them as her character has become more of a part of the group and less the sort of outsider that she is in the first film. So I already like that part of it. And the a cappella singing parts are, pretty fun. What Pitch Perfect 3 does is to stop caring about anything. Pitch Perfect 3 is absolutely absurd. It is a strange and weird movie, and wonderfully so. It is almost plotless. The plot, as it is, involves the Pitch Perfects. I can't remember the name, what they call their group. But the Pitch Perfects go to Europe to perform in the USO. And then there's some sort of competition within the USO where they're competing against the other bands that are playing the USO to gain the favor of one DJ Khaled, who has a little bit more than a cameo in the film and who, listen, I don't know nothing about no DJ Khaled, but what he brings to this movie is an almost Brando in Apocalypse Now level of utterly insane improvisation that has to be seen to be believed. I am not kidding about this. It might not be as actorly as a Brando, but the things that he is saying are so baffling and wonderful. And then that's sort of the whole movie is. The plot, as I've described it, is all the plot that there is, really. Although there is another completely insane plot where the Amy character, or as she likes to call herself, Fat Amy, is played by Rebel Wilson. Her criminal father comes back into the picture. He is played oddly by John Lithgow. Always a fan of John Lithgow. Laugh while you can, Monkey Boy. But casting him as an Australian is a weird move, especially when Hollywood is absolutely littered with Australian actors. Still, he's a fine presence here, and his criminal character is an over-the-top, yacht-owning, thugs-employing criminal that brings this bizarre action movie element to the movie that doesn't make any sense, and that's what I mean when I say that this movie is plotless. It's a movie that wants to have showdowns on yachts and explosions along with a cappella and jam bands, that wants to have Ruby Rose leading an all-female, badass musical group that's the main rival for the Pitch Perfects. And it doesn't really care how those pieces fit together in a puzzle, right? It would much rather just throw the pieces on the table, use a hammer to smack a couple of them together, and like I said, give you this almost Marx Brothersian movie from a plot standpoint. The plot just does not matter here, and I kind of wish there were more movies like this. These characters and actresses have become so likable over the course of this series that getting to spend time with them in this just absurd, over-the-top, crazy movie is an absolute joy. This movie did make me want to go back and revisit the earlier Pitch Perfects, but I doubt that those are ever going to be movies that I want to see over and over again. Pitch Perfect 3 is one that I can honestly see revisiting. I feel like there are so many layers in this bizarre onion that I have barely peeled away, and I look forward to seeing them more. Pitch Perfect 3, 3.5 stars. every so often over on the public broadcasting system, you can catch a British movie like on Masterpiece. And that is the case for one we saw recently, The Child in Time. Now, whether this was a theatrical film or like a BBC movie, I'm not really sure, and I sort of don't really care. It stars the always terrific Benedict Cumberbatch, who we fell in love with via Sherlock and has, segued into, parts in the Marvel movies and, all sorts of, interesting dramatic turns and not so interesting dramatic turns, but who is nevertheless a truly compelling screen presence. So when I saw that there would be a Benedict Cumberbatch movie on PBS, I wanted to tune in and see it. And the way this one was sold to me, and certainly the way the movie chugs along for most of it, is that this is a missing kid mystery movie. That Benedict Cumberbatch's little, I think girl, maybe little boy, I don't remember. At any event, his child has gone missing. And the missing child has sort of destroyed his marriage and led to him being obsessed with tracking the kid down. Okay, this is a formula that we know, that we're familiar with, and that I'm interested to see with Benedict Cumberbatch in the picture to see where this goes. Unfortunately, the mystery never amounts to anything. This is not a movie that involves such handy things as resolutions. Whether that they are, because a missing kid movie is going to go one of three ways. They're going to find the kid alive, they're going to find the kid dead, and they're never going to find the kid, but in doing so there's some sort of revelation about our characters. Benedict either kind of sub A and sub B, either, comes to terms with it or goes all the way down the road of obsession, right? But this movie isn't interested in any of those things. Instead, remember, this movie is called The Child in Time, and it's interested in some sort of weird time travel shenanigans where Benedict Cumberbatch can sort of see events in the past and then see events in the future that allow him and his estranged wife to understand that they're going to have another child because they see this phantom child in the future. And then the movie ends very abruptly. It's very confusing and frustrating, which isn't to say that it's not okay to take a formula movie like this, a missing kid mystery movie, and turn it on its side or do something interesting or go in a complete left turn. But the way this movie does it is so unsatisfying and unnecessarily vague that it becomes a total head scratcher that is in no way satisfying. The Child in Time, 2.5 stars. Speaking of going back in time, let's go back in time and celebrate a Hollywood classic. This week's Hollywood classic is The Seventh Victim. This is a Val Lewton horror movie. If you're unfamiliar with Val Lewton, I can't say I'm terribly surprised. He's not somebody I knew a whole ton about until college, when just coincidentally, Turner Classics sort of spearheaded a DVD box set, re-releasing Lewton's movies and bringing them to a wider audience for the first time in a long time. And I bought that DVD box set, watched a couple of the movies, and then for whatever reason didn't connect really and moved on. It being the Halloween season, Turner Classic is once again airing some of these Lewton movies, and I decided to give them another check out. And man, these are great movies. A little bit of history. Val Lewton was a film producer who was hired by RKO to produce horror content for them in the 1950s. RKO had seen how well Universal Studios had done with their horror movies and kind of wanted to do the same thing, but to do so, more cheaply. As a result, Val Lewton ends up making all this, this group of about a dozen horror movies that are very non-traditional for that time. They're sort of monster movies without the monsters in them. And in The Seventh Victim, the monster is Satan? Yes, The Seventh Victim deals with a Satanist cult and a young woman who has come to the big city looking for her missing sister, only to find out that said missing sister has fallen in with Satanists as she tries to track down her sister, who is missing for most of the movie, and then save her from not only their grasp, but from her sister, but from what led her sister to the Satanists initially, which is her sister's sort of lifelong obsession with death. This is a terrific movie. It looks amazing. Certainly one of the great things about these Lewton pictures is that the photography is absolutely stunning. Now granted, he's not the director of these, but as the producer overseeing everything, he sort of gives these pictures a sort of uniform look where they have taken the elements of noir and brought them to the horror world, which had previously been so dominated by Gothic looking style. This is a much more, sort of noirish looking piece. Solid mystery to this. Again, it looks great. I could hardly have enjoyed it more. One of the big things I liked about this movie that I do want to say before I go, and about all of Lewton's movies, is because these were B pictures, by which I mean they were movies that were meant to run as the second half of a double feature. So you have your A big budget movie and then your B movie, which is smaller budget. These movies are only 70 minutes long, and that is a treat. I wish they were still making movies that were only 70 minutes long, because sometimes you're watching even an 80, 90-minute movie, and you're like, this is too much movie. But at 70 minutes, The Seventh Victim is a lean, mean, devil-worshipping machine. Seventh Victim, 4 stars. Now, let's go in for an action explosion. On this week's Action Explosion, it is time to revisit one of the great modern action stars, in one Mr. Jason Statham. Yes, this movie is called Redemption, and it sees Jason Statham playing a homeless dude who is an ex-army soldier who decides, for reasons, to just move into some rich guy's apartment while he's out of town, sort of take over his life, romance a nun, and then go on sort of a revenge killing spree to get revenge for a friend of his who was also a street person who was killed by a drug dealer, and now he's going to track the drug dealer down using this rich guy's resources, while again, this is important, romancing a nun. It's okay. It's a weirder Statham vehicle. Every so often Statham appears in these movies where it's just odd, right? There's a degree to which when I sit down to a Jason Statham movie, I just want to watch a straightforward actioner. And I understand that he doesn't always want to make a straightforward action picture. I sympathize with that, and I suppose I don't always want to watch a straightforward action picture. If you've been watching these movies, these reviews, the action movies I'm going to give 4 or 5 stars to are going to be ones that think outside of the box. Unfortunately, sometimes you go to a different box, and this is one that just becomes like a muddled and odd without bringing the necessary artistry along with it. It's an okay movie, it's just not Statham enough, which is why I'm giving Redemption 2.5 stars. Now, let's get spaced out. This week on Spaced Out, I want to talk to you about Mars Attacks, one of the only movies based on trading cards. This one, as you may recall, came out, late 90s, early 2000s, Tim Burton directed movie. Hadn't seen it in a long time, watched it recently on an airplane. Now, why an airplane, specifically an Icelandic airplane, decided that one of the movies they should have available for people to watch is Mars Attacks? I could not tell you, let alone a copy of Mars Attacks in 4:3, so a square inside a widescreen seatback viewing screen. But hey, who am I to complain? I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. It is, it's a kind of a slapstick thing. It's meant to be silly and over the top as Martians attack Earth and kill a whole bunch of people. In a lot of ways, the main draw here is the all-star cast. You have Jack Nicholson, you have Michael J. Fox, Pierce Brosnan, Sarah Jessica Parker, who gets her head surgically attached to a dog, Joe Don Baker, a very early performance from Jack Black, a pretty early performance from Natalie Portman, Martin Short, Big Jim Brown, and the legend herself, Pam Grier. Add to that probably the best motion picture turn from former Tim Burton ingenue Lisa Marie as a Martian robot, and and a fairly funny movie. Like this movie's all right. It feels almost like one of those old Hollywood pictures, like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, but this time Martians are killing a bunch of people. Pretty funny, not the greatest thing ever, but a good time. If you're on an airplane, hey, you can do a lot worse. Mars Attacks, 3.5 stars. Now it's time for Calling All Horror Hounds. Now I'm sure I don't need to tell all the rest of you horror hounds this, but for the rest of you, for me personally, and I think for a lot of horror fans of my generation who kind of came of age in the 90s, there was no greater influence on my appreciation of horror than one Mr. Joe Bob Briggs, the original drive-in movie critic. And when I was growing up, he had a weekly show on TNT called Monster Vision, where he would show 2, sometimes even 3 horror movies over the course of the night. And it was a place that, even though they were edited for TV, introduced me to a lot of horror pictures and stars and directors. And then through that, tracking down Joe Bob's old books, like Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In, and then, finding out about some of the great hardcore horror pictures, and, really getting to where I am today with my affection of horror, especially horror from the 1980s. Well, Joe Bob is back. One of them online streaming services, Shudder, has given Joe Bob his own show again, and he recently did a big horror movie marathon, and it was, listen, whenever somebody comes back after 20 years off the air, it can be dicey, right? You sometimes end up with something that's stale and unfunny. You sometimes end up with something that's weird and controversial, and sometimes you end up with something that is truly amazing and that really is modern, but shows that the talent behind it hasn't missed a step, and that's thankfully the case with Joe Bob. And in this recent horror movie marathon, Joe Bob gave me the opportunity to watch a movie I haven't seen in a number of years, a movie that he calls maybe the best horror movie of the 80s, and it's difficult to argue with him, and that is Hellraiser. If you are a horror movie and you have never gotten around to seeing Hellraiser, it's about time to do it. This is the one that introduces the great Pinhead to the horror movie monster pantheon. And what can you say about this movie? This is a movie where a dude finds a puzzle box, and when he opens it, he gets sucked into a hell dimension wherein a group of ex-angels who have decided to go and really buy into, I'm trying to think of what I can say on a family television show, who have really decided to buy into sadomasochism, torture him for a long time. Then he escapes, comes back to life in the attic of his old house, has no skin. It's a really cool effect. And his former girlfriend, played by Claire Higgins, and played to perfection. This is a terrific performance, as she plays a very complicated and layered character who is married to Andrew Robinson, who nerds like me know as Garrick from Deep Space Nine. She has never really liked Andrew Robinson, had formerly been having an affair with the guy with no skin, who it turns out is Andrew Robinson's brother, loves this guy so much that she gets to the point where she's willing to kill for him, because the more people she kills, the closer no-skin guy can come to coming back to life. Meanwhile, Andrew Robinson's daughter is twigging to something weird going on. She gets in touch with Pinhead and the rest of his pals, they're called the Cenobites, and leads them back to the house where they can get back the guy who escaped from them. This is a super imaginative movie, wholly original. It's from the mind of horror author Clive Barker, one of the few movies he actually directed based on his own material. But it creates this wholly original monster myth, which is, I think, something that we have had hundreds of years of horror at this point, more than 100 years of horror movies, and those horror movies tend to build on the same couple of archetypes, right? They tend to be some version of a Frankenstein movie or some version of a Dracula movie. In the late 1950s, early 1960s, George Romero invents the modern zombie, and then that becomes kind of the third thing. And it's exciting to see creatures like the Cenobites, who are neither fish nor fowl, that are really their own thing. This is a wonderfully shot, very evocative movie. It doesn't have a lot of likable characters in it, but does have a lot of complex characters in it, which is really fun to see. Hellraiser, 4.5 stars. Now it's time for the worst of the week. This week's worst of the week is Table 19, a fitting movie for our worst of the week because, like the first movie we talked about today, it stars Anna Kendrick. And again, Anna Kendrick is charming as all get out. You put her in a movie, you're probably going to end up with a pretty good movie on her shoulders alone. Table 19, not the movie that could do that, unfortunately. The one that proves the rule. In this one, Anna Kendrick is invited to the wedding of her ex-fiancé. And she is seated at table 19, the eponymous table 19, which is apparently where they have sat all of the rejects that they invited to the wedding anyway. Why have these people been invited to the wedding? Who knows? Especially, why would you invite your ex-girlfriend to the wedding? Oh no, it's not, I'm sorry, it is not the wedding of her ex-fiancé, it is the wedding of her ex-fiancé's sister. So that makes sense, I guess. Listen, this is a rough movie. It is a very indie movie, and we spend a lot of time with each of the people who populate Table 19 and learning their dysfunctions. And there are some stars here. Craig Robinson is at the table. Phoebe from Friends is at the table. I can't remember her name right now. And, you know, we learn all of their dysfunctions, and they all, of course, have problems that we have to learn about. Anna Kendrick's big problem is that she broke up with this dude after she found out that she was pregnant, and he flaked. Yeah, and here's the thing that really makes this movie terrible. This movie roots for the flake. By the end of the movie, we are supposed to be sympathizing with this man-child who is unready who dumped his girlfriend at the time of arguably her greatest need for support because he can't handle it. And by the end of the movie, we are supposed to go, oh, poor guy, they should get back together. Spoiler alert, they get back together. It's a pretty insulting movie on a lot of levels. That is just one example of it. It's gross and stupid and boring, and I really hated it. Table 19, 1 star. And now it's time for the best of the bunch. This week's best of the bunch is John Wick, and how could it not be? Have you guys seen John Wick? This is the one where Keanu Reeves is an assassin who comes out of retirement because some doofuses steal his car and kill his dog. What were you guys thinking? They have messed with the wrong guy, and now John Wick is on a murder mission where the body count is, I don't know, somewhere up in the 20s as he shoots dude after dude in the head as he tries to get to the one guy who spearheaded this whole thing of, you know, for no reason, killing his dog. This may be the perfect action movie. It is amazingly visceral. It's an adrenaline pumper. I enjoy that there's there's a negative to this movie in that there are hardly any women in it. And the one woman who's in it, Adrienne Palicki, who I do like quite a bit, is a bad guy. But I do appreciate that there's no woman in peril. We have not harmed a woman or kidnapped a woman to motivate Wick. In this case, this is kind of unique in that he's getting revenge for his dog, and it is amazing. The action is supremely well choreographed. The mythology The sort of assassin world mythology they build in this movie is fascinating. It's a great movie. There's not a ton I want to say about it because it's a movie that has to be experienced. It is unexperienced. And when you watch it, it's such a driving force of a movie that I think it would be impossible to not get caught up in it and to not be just, blown away by the force of nature that Reeves is able to embody here. Reeves has always been a solid and charming actor, but in Wick, he is able to become a true force of nature. This is a movie to be beat. John Wick, 5 stars. So that is going to do it for this week's Every Movie Ever. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week as we keep trying to review every movie ever made. And don't forget to visit our website, northmetrotv.com/everymovieever. There, you can watch reviews of every movie we've ever covered here on the show, as well as complete episodes. That's northmetrotv.com/everymovieever.